Okay, I'm going to talk about decorators, and I'm not going to go into decorators in any great detail, and also I'm going to do some live coding. When Andrea sent around an email a few weeks ago saying, please submit your slides, I thought I'd be really, really cheeky and say, oh, I don't have any slides, I'm just going to live code. And she came back and she said, that's really brave. And I thought, no, it'll be fine. And then I was at a technology meetup in Carlow a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite good. And the person did quite well, but they struggled. And I thought, what have I done? What have I let myself in for? So what I actually have is I'm using Jupyter Notebook here, and I have some of the introductory material in the notebook. And then halfway through it, I'm going to jump into Vim, and I'm going to do some live coding. And what I'm trying to do here, this is a talk for people who maybe know what decorators are and have maybe used them, but haven't actually written one themselves. And this is what I went through when I had my aha moment, when I said, now I understand what it is. So that's the idea of this talk. So it's not like, you don't have to be a Python ninja. I'm not a Python ninja. I think at one of the recent PyCons, somebody got up and said they were a mediocre Python programmer. I'm an ordinary Python programmer. I'm not a super duper Python programmer. I would never claim to be. So this is a sort of intermediate type talk, okay? So I'm a lecturer in IT Carlow. There's my URL. This is a Jupyter Notebook, so I've created it as a PDF, and you can go and get that PDF if you want. So why would we want to learn a little bit about decorators? Because knowing how to effectively use more of Python's language features makes you a better Python programmer. So the more of these other features are these advanced features that maybe you don't find in other programming languages, but you find in them in Python. If you can master them, so much the better, right? So a decorator is a programming tool to help you adjust the behavior of pre-existing code, yours or others, right? And some people, when they first think about it and first come across it, they think it's kind of scary. So that's why I said that hopefully by the end of this talk, you won't think they're that scary. And we'll, if I'm doing it right. There's two types. There's two main types. There's function decorators and there's class decorators. This talk is going to talk about function decorators. I'm not really going to talk about class decorators. And to be perfectly honest, the reason I'm not going to talk about class decorators is because I've never used a class decorator, nor have I written one. The Python code that I write tends not to be object-oriented. I know some people find that shocking, but that's just the way I work. I'm much more into writing functions and working with functions. So I'm going to do it, hopefully, if things go well, by live coding. Before we get there, you may have come across some decorators in your Python travels already. If you are into creating classes and objects of those classes, you will know what's at static method, at class method, at property. You've probably come across those. If you're a Flask programmer, you've come across at app.root. And in fact, the example that I have is going to be built around a little Flask application. Okay, so there's 4 things that you need to understand or know about before you can write your own decorators. Okay, and the 4 things are functions, how arguments are passed into functions, and some of the more sort of advanced argument processing. You need to understand that functions can take the name of a function as an argument and then call it. And then you need to also understand that functions can actually return a function as a return value, which can then be called. Okay, so let's look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So everybody knows how functions work in Python. We give them a name with def, we decide what our arguments are going to be, we then do some processing, and then we can call that function. So here we have a little function, myfunc, takes 2 arguments, they get multiplied together and get returned, and we can call it myfunc 1020 and comes back 200. Everybody understands that. That's pretty straightforward. Argument processing can get kind of complex kind of quickly, especially when you've got star args and star KW args. And if you're like me, if you're an old C programmer, star KW arg scares the life out of you because that's a pointer to something. And it's like, oh my God. You know, I just many nightmares of programming and stuff like that. But anyways, let's see what that means in Python. So here we have another version of the myfunc function, which takes 1 positional argument and any number of other arguments. So what I do in here is I take the other arguments and I multiply them with a, and I run through whatever number of arguments there are. So when I call this, I can call it like I did previously with 1020, and it gives me back 200. And I can also call it with any number of arguments, and it gives me back the correct number. So that So that, and of course I was then, didn't believe if my code was working correctly, so I then wrote a little tiny test and said, oh yes, that is getting the same number. So that function can take any number of arguments and process them, okay? We can also use **KWArgs, keyword arguments, and here what we do is we have any number of keyword arguments being passed into the function and being processed. So here the code is that we start off with result equals 1, and then we take each of the keys and values that have been passed in as keys and values into this function, and we take each of the values and we multiply it 2 res, and we do that repeatedly until we have worked it all out. So if we do something like this, my func b equals 20, a equals 10, c equals 40, d equals 30. It does the right thing. And again, I did my little test, and sure enough, my code is working correctly, right? So we can have regular, straightforward functions, and then we can have functions that can take any number of arguments or any number of keyword arguments. Okay? Happy enough with that? Okay, right. So just need to be aware of those when you come to work. So there's another example. It's only got 2 arguments this time, and it's got less numbers, okay? And even another one, because I couldn't convince myself that this code was working the way I expected to, and sure enough it did. Right, so that's the first 2. Third one is functions taking the name of a function as an argument and then calling it. So here we have a function that takes the name of a function, which, because I've got no imagination, I called func, and in this function, it runs that function. So what we do is we have another func here, and if we were to call another func with parentheses, it would say, I'm another func, because that's what that function does. And what I'm going to, so there it goes, I'm actually calling it there, and then what I'm doing is I'm passing it into my func. I pass it in as a name, right? So if I mistakenly put parentheses there, I'm actually going to call the function and then pass that in and try to call that, and that's going to break. But here what I'm doing is I'm passing in the function name. The function name is being passed into my func. My func is then running that function and passing me back the result. So that's how we send a function in, and that function then gets called. And then the last one is functions returning a function as a return value, which is then called. So here we have a function which has got another function inside it. So it's got an embedded function or an nested function, or whatever you want to call it. So inner func is defined inside the namespace or the scope of my func. And what inner func does is when you call it, it says, I'm the inner func. And what we're doing is we're returning the name of that inner func when this function, this my func, gets invoked. So if I say f equals my func, and then I say f and I call f, it says I'm the inner func, because we've passed back that code and assigned it to a variable, and that variable can then be executed. Okay? So those are the 4 things. I should stop waving my hands around, put it in my pocket. It's the best thing to do. Those 4, I don't need it until I start typing. These 4 things are what you need to understand. Okay? So what we do with decorators is we use decorators to wrap existing functionality. So how do we know when to do this? This is what I've always struggled with. How do I know when I need to use a decorator and when I don't need to use a decorator? Right? So it turned out that I was building a small little system, and I came across something, and suddenly the light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, maybe this is where I need to use a decorator, and I realized it was. Okay? So I'm going to use, as a case study, a little Flask app, and I'm going to deliberately keep it really simple. Okay? So if there's any super duper Flask programmers in here, or people who believe that everything should be coded as a RESTful API, I mean, I'm going to break a whole pile of those Flask and RESTful API rules just to get across that I'm showing you how to create a decorator. Okay? So let's start with some code. So this is where I take my hand back out of my pocket, and there is the really simple Flask app, which is a slight change on the one that's on the Flask documentation site. So I'm going to copy that. So here goes. Wish me luck. I'm going to open my editor and pull it over here, because you guys can all see it, but these guys can't because half a bit of the screen's cut off. And I'm going to cut in my code, and I'll save it as pyconie.py. Right, it turns on my syntax highlighting. I feel good. I'm now going to run it and check that it works. So I open up a terminal, and of course I'm running Python 3. pyconie.py. What else is there to run? Why would I run something that's old and decrepit like Python 2 when I've got Python 3? So here we go. And I say open up that URL, and hopefully it will open up and it will say, there we go, hello PyCon Ireland 2015. So now I've got my cheat sheet here to keep me straight. So everybody happy with what's happened so far?
Nobody's lost. The only person's lost is me. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some extra roots. So this is where this is what most people's exposure to decorators are. They use them, right? So in Flask we have this lovely little app.root, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something called page 1, because again I have absolutely no imagination, and I'm going to say let's call this again. I'll just for fun I'll give it exactly the same name as the URL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say return this, this is page 1. Okay, so that was almost too exciting, wasn't it? I can hear the anticipation so because I've got debug switched on, Flask has automatically reloaded that for me. So if I come back over to my browser, if I rerun it, it's still working, and if I say page 1, it says this is page 1, so that is working. That's good, super. So everybody's okay. Nobody's saying what's he up to. All right. So I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna paste it in 2 times, and I'm going to now make this page 2. Right. Then again, and let's make sure I change them all because this will break otherwise. And it's going to be page 3. And again, I don't trust myself, so I save it, restart, and now I come back. Page 1 is working, page 2 is working, and page 3 is working. So now we've got 3 pages. So then I think, okay, this is lovely, but what I would like to be able to do is I would like to be able to restrict access to page 1, page 2, and page 3. In other words, only people who are logged into my web application get to see page 1, page 2, and page 3. Otherwise, they have to log in or they're told to go somewhere else. So they can see this lovely Hello PyCon Ireland 2015 message. That will pop up for everybody. But only people who are logged into my web app get to see page 1, page 2, and page 3. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple of other URLs. One called login, which will simulate that somebody's logged in. One called logout, which will simulate them logging out. And one called status, which will tell me whether or not I'm logged in or logged out. And to do that, I'm going to use the session variable that comes with Flask. So, because I'm going to be maintaining some state on the server, so I pull in the session variable. And what I have to remember to do down here is I have to get that session variable to work, I have to set a secret key. And I'm going to say, what's my secret key? You will never guess. Right, so that's my secret key, which nobody will ever guess. My kids, who are all teenagers, annoyed me one day, so what I did was I changed the Wi-Fi password on them. Of course, it was like, the end of the world as far as they were concerned, so they kept coming, and of course I changed it to, you will never guess. So they kept coming to me and saying, Daddy, please tell us what the Wi-Fi password is, and I kept saying, you will never guess. And they kept saying, Daddy, you're awful, and I kept saying, you asked me what the password is, and yes, what is it? You will never guess. And they said, oh, Daddy, just tell us. It took them about 2 or 3 hours before they realized what I was up to. But there you go. Right, so you would obviously put something in there that is much more harder to guess, but that will switch on sessions for us, okay? So having done that, I'm then going to say, okay, well, I need something that allows people to log in. So I'm going to say approot/login. I get this right. And okay, and I say let's have a function called login, and it's going to go and ask the person for their login credentials and then check them against the password in the database and then say whether or not they get in or not. And eventually, having done all that, I'm not going to write that code now, having done all that, it's then going to do something in the session to say that they're logged in. So what I'm going to do is in my session variable, which is in Flask is just like a dictionary, I'm going to say session, and I'm going to create a key called logged in, and I'm going to set that value to be true, right? And I'm then going to say return, you are now logged in. So that's simulating somebody logging in. What did I forget? Whoops. Dear me. Thank you. Well spotted. Thanks. I meant to ask you at the start, if I do anything silly, please tell me, because I'll just keep going otherwise and it'll crash and then I'll say, uh-oh. But anyways, and let's look at that. I'm using double quotes and single quotes. This isn't even PEP 8 compliant code. Genie Mac, and they pay me to teach this stuff professionally. Good Lord. So we're also going to have, if we're going to have a log in, we're going to have a log out, right? Again, I'm only interested in teaching you how to do decorators, not how to write proper PEP 8 compliant code. But anyways, so log out. So what log out's going to do is log out is going to be also pretty simple. So what log out would do would check, well, it probably needs to check if you're logged in or not before it tries to log you out, but we'll not worry about that just yet. What we'll do is we'll say session.pop, and we're going to pop out of our dictionary the logged out key, or the key value pair. So it's going to remove, it's going to remove that logged out, and it's going to say return you are now logged out. Okay, everybody with me so far? Yes? All right. I don't hear anybody complaining. And I'm going to also have a URL called status, so app_root/status. And what status is going to do is status is going to give me a message, will tell me whether I'm logged in or not. So I say if logged in session, return you are currently logged in. All right. Otherwise, I'm not going to say else. That's either going to be true or not. So I can just say, well, otherwise, return you are not logged in. Okay. Right. So now I haven't done that. I'm going to save it. It has reloaded without any errors, so it's looking good so far. So if I come back up here and I say, if I say log in, it comes back and says you are logged in. If I say status, it says you are currently logged in. If I say log out, it says you are logged out. And if I say status, it should tell me that I'm currently logged out. If only I could spell it. There we go. Right? So I've got a little bit of code which allows me to log in, allows me to log out, allows me to check. Okay, so then I say to myself, okay, well, I want a mechanism that allows me to check that this stuff runs only if you're logged in, right? So the naive solution, or the first solution, certainly it's the solution that I came up with, so it's obviously naive because it popped into my brain first, is that you come up here and you say, well, like I have this code down in session, and I know that it checks to see if I'm logged in or not, so all I need to do is copy and paste that code into the ones and check. So I say, okay, well, like if I come up here and I do something like this, so let's insert a line in here, and I come down here and I say, let's take that line and let's pop it in here. So I say, if I'm logged in, well, let them see the content on this page, which is, this is page 1. Otherwise, we tell them, return log in first. Right? So I could do it like that. And what I could do is I could say, okay, I need to copy that code and paste it into each of those functions. Right? I can just see all the software engineers in the room going, oh. You know, and my software engineer lecturer from years and years and years ago is in my brain saying, what are you doing? You know, but anyways, that's what you could do, and that would work. It's pretty naive. Now, and the problem with it is that here, in something as small as this code, which has nothing to do with page 1, is suddenly swamping what's in page 1, which is only this little line here, right? So I've got code in my function which isn't really related to my function, it's related to my web app. So it sort of feels like it's in the wrong place. Because it is in the wrong place, what we should do is we should abstract that out and put it into some sort of function. So we could say, okay, well, we could write a little function. So the next along the evolution of how do we solve this problem is to say, okay, let's write a little function and let's pass in this string into the function and have that function return the string, and we call the function from within each of our functions. But that also is bad too, because we've only just added a bit of indirection into the fact that we have a problem with where this code should be. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm not going to change that code at all. I'm going to leave it exactly as it is, and I'm going to create a decorator instead. And what the decorator is going to do is the decorator is going to check to see if we are logged in or not. And if we are, it's going to let us see the page that we decorate, or run the function that we decorate. Otherwise, it won't. Right? So, how do I write a decorator? It turns out it's not really that difficult. So let me come up here and say, okay, well, what do we need? What do we need in this code? Well, we're going to need some code. I'll put it in a function in a minute. We're going to need some code which says, look, check and see if logged in is in session. I'm not going to save this because if I do, it'll crash. And if it is, what I want to do in here is I want to run the function, that I'm decorating. Right? Otherwise, and I want to run that function, and there's going to be some sort of return there, which I'm going to run the function and return whatever its results were. Logged in. Oh yeah, thank you. Good. Say, what are the rest of you? Everybody asleep already? In. Thank you. You just wanted to see it crash and then see me panic, didn't you? All right. Well, I'm 5 minutes. I should get there. So that, and then what we want to do is if we are not logged in, what we're going to do is we're going to say, we'll say, please log in to continue. Right, so that's what we want this function to do. We want it to check to see if we're logged in, and if we are, run the function that we're decorating. Otherwise, return a message and say, no, don't do that. So in here, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to run the function, and I'm going to want to run the function that I'm decorating, and I'm going to want to run it with exactly the same function signature that it has in its original sort of incantation. So if the thing takes no arguments, I want it to run it with no arguments. If it takes arguments, I want it to run it with arguments. And the way you do that is you call the function like this, and we'll see how we connect this up in just a second. But I'm saying I'm going to run the function as if it has just been called by whoever's calling it, right? So I say return funcargs, kwargs, and I want to put this inside a function. So I say def, and I'm going to call this the wrapped function, and what this does is it takes as its sole parameter or sole argument, it takes something called func, which is the name of the function that we're decorating. Okay, so I've sort of abstracted that code that was down here in session or in status, which I was going to put into each of all of those functions. I've taken that out, right? So what I need to do is indent it further. So there we go, and I need to wrap it in a function which is actually the name of my decorator. So I'm going to call my decorator check login, and it's going to take no parameters, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to return wrapped function, right? So we've got a function in here which takes a function name and runs that function. So there's the function coming in, and there's it being run. And then we have another function here which has a function inside it which it returns, right? So those four things that we need to understand are appearing in this code, okay? The other thing that we have to worry about is because we've got all these scary arguments here, it turns out that the details behind that are quite scary. So scary that somebody decided to add them to the standard library. So, and I think it was Raymond Hedinger and a bunch of other people who did it. So there's a bunch of extra code you have to write in here if you don't import it from the standard library. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say import up here. I'm going to say from func tools, and I'm going to say import wraps. And all I need to remember to do, let me get this in the right place, is in here, is I need to decorate my wrapped function with something called wraps, and I pass it the name of the function that I'm decorating. Okay? So I've just saved that, and it has restarted without any errors, but I haven't used my function decorator yet, right? At the moment, I can still get at page 1 and page 2, so couple of seconds and then we'll be done. So there's page 1, I can still see it. However, if I come down here and I say do check login here. I copy that and I paste it in there, and I paste it in there, and I save that. It restarts and it crashed. Did I use the wrong name? I think I might have. What did I call my decorator? Check login at check login. Say it again. Oh yeah, sorry, the function also goes in there. There we go. Right. It's only, if only I'd cut and paste it, right? So let me start that up again. Let's see what happens. Come in here. So I'm not logged in. Oh, yes, I should be listening to my audience because my audience told me what the problem was. That's in the wrong place. That should also be args and ** KW args. So thank you for over there, because that's exactly what I should have been doing. It's restart it, come back here, and if I say, well, let me see, my status, what is my status? Well, I'm currently not logged in. If I try to go to page 1, it says, please log in to continue. It does the same thing for page 2. If I then go and I log in, it says you're now logged in. And now, if I go back to page 1, it says this is page 1, right? And if I come back and I log out, and I then try to see page 3, it says you're not logged in. So this decorator here has allowed me to indicate which of these URLs require a login and which don't. And I've abstracted that functionality out of the functions so that anybody looking at this code and wants to change page 1 just has to worry about page 1. They only have to worry about changing the decorator when they change how the login system works. Right? 1 minute over time.